Welcome to the Real Estate Espresso Podcast, your morning shot of what's new in the world of real estate investing. I'm your host, Victor Menashe. Today's another AMA episode. That is, Ask Me Anything. I love to answer your questions, and if you have a question you think is going to be of broad interest, send it in. I'll answer it live on the air. Send your questions to victor@victorjm.com. That's victor@victorjm.com. Carolyn from Montreal asks, I'm not an expert in Excel, and I paid to purchase an Excel-based tool for analyzing multifamily apartment projects. I'm still learning about everything the tool can do. What's your recommendation for analyzing the project? Well, Carolyn, this is a great question. In my experience, there are several different types of analysis that need to be performed depending on the exit strategy of your project. It's the exit strategy that fundamentally changes the type of analysis you're going to do and the number of phases. If the project has a long-term hold component, then you want to model the long-term hold. But if you've got construction involved, you need to model the construction. It also is going to have a leasing period. It's going to have a stabilization period. And then finally, of course, the exit. But the exit will be different depending on whether you're selling the building or you're refinancing it. We tend to break down the project into those individual phases, and each phase needs to be analyzed separately, and each phase needs to work, meaning the numbers have to work on a standalone basis. For example, it won't help to have a great long-term hold if you can't get it through the leasing phase, and leasing won't matter if you can't get through construction, and so on. I find that most of the prepackaged software solutions assume a single model. They assume a straightforward purchase, maybe some improvements in a sale, but the truth is that most projects are really more complex than that, and they're executed in phases. The financing of those phases will often vary. For example, you might purchase the land with a small amount of equity, and then once you've got the entitlements, you might raise additional capital. You might raise some additional debt to go through the zoning process and put a small interest reserve during that phase. From there, you might raise additional equity for the construction, and then you're of course going to have your construction debt. And once construction's complete, you might have a short-term bank financing, and after seasoning, you would reappraise the property and replace all of the financing with permanent financing. For that reason, we create our own custom spreadsheet each time we undertake a project. Each of these phases look like a separate project with their own financial metrics and criteria. A separate financial model is needed for each phase of the project, and they need to tie together. When you add the different types of financing terms, this affects how the project is modeled. I'll give you a simple example. Let's say you've got two classes of investors. The first class are your straight equity investors. They have a share of ownership of the project. The second class of investors might be preferred investors. They have a rate of interest calculation on their investment and then perhaps a lower percentage of ownership. Maybe their interest rate only starts to accrue when you get the building permit and then becomes payable to the investor when you get your occupancy permit. And then the interest accrual terminates when you refinance into the permanent financing. What I've described here is a perfectly normal situation, but I can guarantee you that very few of the canned software solutions out there will model this timeline correctly. By the time you figured out all the formulas in the spreadsheet that you just purchased, you find out they don't model your specific situation properly, you'll have expended the same effort as if you would have created the spreadsheet yourself. When you're dealing with investors, or even if it's your own money, you need to understand the formulas in the spreadsheet and make sure that they accurately reflect what's actually going to happen in the project. If the financial model is different from your real on-the-ground assumptions, then you're going to have a problem. It's a problem that could have been avoided if you had an analyst who's both an expert in Excel and underwriting projects of your type. That analyst needs to audit the spreadsheet multiple times until they're no longer finding mistakes in it. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, there's no shortcut here. It's slow, it's painful, it's tedious, and it's time-consuming. If you find your financial model is incorrect, there's very little you can do in the project to actually recover from that. This is one of those items I feel really strongly about. Finding that person that can really help you might be difficult. You might find an analyst for a commercial mortgage broker who has the skills, might be able to help you on a consulting basis. You might find an analyst who works for a major developer who would be willing to consult on the side. This skill is a critical function in your investment business, and if you don't have it inherently within your team, then you need to go hire it. Buying a piece of software that you don't understand will not help you. I realize this is probably not what you wanted to hear, but it's honestly my best advice based on seeing many, many projects. And I've seen even large projects in a glossy package with beautiful 3D renderings showing what the swimming pool is going to look like. And I've been able to punch holes in those financial analyses usually within a few minutes. As an investor, as a syndicator, you never want to be in that position. So go hire the talent and don't waste your money on the canned software. It's going to need to be customized the first time you use it anyway. I want to thank you, Carolyn, for a great question. In the meantime, have an awesome rest of your day. Go make some great things happen. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.